Thank you for your interest in becoming an HCV landlord for the Rosenberg Housing Authority. I'd like to go over some of the do's and don'ts and the instructions so you can make an informed choice about whether to continue on in the program and let you know the benefits of participating with us. So, why should you participate? Number one, you can be assured of a consistent rent payment each month. You will have protection from a tenant's financial hardship because throughout the course of the lease, if the tenant's income changes, the housing authority's payment will change with it in opposition to it, so that if the tenant's payment has to go down because they've lost income, the housing authority's payment will go up and vice versa. You are guaranteed periodic inspections. Now, the housing authority will inspect as soon as you request an inspection initially. Then we will inspect every 2 years. So it is still your responsibility to go ahead and write in your lease that every 3 to 6 months you just do a periodic inspection to make sure everything's okay. If you're an apartment complex or you have several different units, you can keep your vacancies low. And you always have a source of good, eligible tenants that can fill your empty units. Now, the housing authority will accept apartments, houses, condos, and duplexes onto the rental assistance program. How much can you charge for rent? Well, the housing authority will not specify a specific amount. You're allowed to charge whatever rent you would like. However, there are certain qualifications about that rent. The rent must be reasonable for the area in which your unit is associated, which means it needs to be comparable to other units in that area that were built in the same year, have the same square footage, have the same amenities, the same bedroom size, things like that. And it must be comparable to the rents that would be charged to a non-program participant. You cannot charge more to a person that's receiving federal housing assistance than an individual that is not. And the housing authority has a payment standard that you can find on our website. You can find our current payment standards. There's a certain amount that we cannot go over for each bedroom size. It must fall under those payment standards. The family is required to pay 30% of their income toward rent, but it cannot exceed 40% of the tenant's income. So once you choose to become a housing choice voucher landlord, are you required to lease to every single voucher holder that comes into your door? And the answer is no. Landlords have freedom to rent to whomever you choose. And you are not required to house families just because you choose to participate. You must still make sure that the potential tenant fills out an application, goes through your own screening process. We will not do a tenant history or any type of eligibility screening process for you. You're required to do that on your own, but you cannot discriminate against any participant based upon color, race, religion, sex, familial status, or national origin. So there are some things that we can and cannot provide to you concerning your tenant. We can let you know the family's current address if we have it. We can let you know the name and address of current and previous landlords if we have that information. And you can be assured that the family's income eligible for the program, that they have not committed a felony within the last 3 years, and that they are not on the lifetime sex offender registry. However, we cannot give you any information that we might have about the tenancy history. It's your responsibility to find that information out on your own, and we cannot give you any criminal history of the family members as well. You're required to do your own criminal checks. Now, who pays what? Tenants are responsible for all application fees and security deposits, and those security deposits cannot exceed 1 month's rent. Tenants are responsible for whatever utilities are not covered in the rent, and those utilities need to be in the tenant's name. The housing authority will calculate the portion of the rent that's going to be paid by the tenant and the housing authority will pay the remainder. This is not something that you and the tenant get to discuss as far as what their portion is going to be. The housing authority will let both of you know what the tenant is responsible for and what the housing authority is responsible for, and all of that money will be sent directly to the landlord. Just know that these portions, these rental portions, can change throughout the year that they are on your in your unit, dependent upon their income. So who pays what? Just to let you know, the Housing Choice Voucher Program does not provide free housing. The housing authority is not responsible for the full amount of rent unless the tenant's rent is zero. The participants will be paying a portion of that rent, and here again, that rental portion can change throughout the term of the lease. The amount of assistance that is received and that the tenant is responsible for is based upon 30% of their adjusted household income. There is an allowance added to the rent that you are charging for utilities that's factored into the rent calculation, and that is dependent upon what utilities you're saying you're providing and what utilities the tenant is responsible for. So, what exactly is a utility allowance? When you receive your inspection packet and when you receive the RTA that's included in there, you must let us know what utilities you're going to provide and what utilities you're going to pay for and what utilities the tenant is going to pay for. And depending upon what you state, that depends upon the utility allowance. And the utility allowance is a modest allowance for the cost of the utilities, not included in the rent, and the family is therefore responsible for it. For example, if you have a 3-bedroom house and the tenant is responsible only for electric, and the heating, cooking, and water heating are electric, and all appliances are supplied by the owner, a utility allowance would look similar to this. We would circle in yellow the things that the tenant is responsible for paying, such as the heating electric for a 3-bedroom was $18 at the time. Cooking electric was $8 at the time. So what we will do is we will take all of these calculations. So here was heating electric. Here was cooking electric. We'll take these numbers. We will add them down here at the bottom. Add them all up. And then the tenant is responsible, or the tenant will have a utility allowance of $144. Now, you and I both know that that's not enough to probably even pay for an electric bill. But here again, this is a modest allowance. I talked earlier about a payment standard. All right. Let me get back to it. The maximum monthly assistance payment for a family that is assisted in the voucher program is a payment standard. So this is before deducting the tenant's portion. So what we do is we look at your rent that you're asking. We add to it the utility allowance that we just talked about, and that is the gross rent. So the gross rent must be under our payment standard. For a list of the payment standards, you can go to www.rosenbergha.org. I have not listed them here because they change yearly. How then do we determine a tenant's rent? So let's say, for example, a family comes to you. They have 3 children. Their wages are $16,040 annually. For every child, the housing authority gives the family a $480 deduction. So 480 times 3 is what gives you the $1,440. And then they pay for childcare because the family works. So they get a deduction of their childcare of $2,600. So what we then do is we will take the amount of income that they have. We will reduce it by all their deductions, which gives us $12,000. So we'll take that $12,000, we'll divide it by 12. That gives us $1,000 times 30%, and that gives us $300, would basically be 30% of their income each month. Let's say the home that you're going to rent to them is $1,250 a month. Based upon the utilities that they're responsible for, they are $150. Therefore, they have a gross rent of $1,400. So then what we will do is we will take the $1,400 in the gross rent, we will subtract the $300, and we will of the family share. So we then get our assistance as $1,100. We'll take the $1,100 and subtract it from your rent, and then the tenant's portion would then be $150 that they're responsible to pay every month, and we will pay the other $1,100. So what paperwork is required? Well, if you have never participated on the program before, one of the first things you'll have to do after you receive the yellow inspection packet is fill out the green new owner certification package. That is going to ask that you provide us with your government issued ID, with proof of ownership of the property there that you are wishing to put on housing. If it is owned by you personally, we're going to need your Social Security card. If it's owned by a business, or if it's an LLC, we're going to need the SS4, which indicates what your EIN number is. The Foreclosure Act of 2009 is no longer applicable, so we're not going to ask for that. And you will get information on the Violence Against Women's Act that you're responsible to abide by. And this is what the new owner certification form is. It basically says, what's your name, where do you want us to send your checks, and information about you so that we can get everything set up for you. We do have direct deposit, and we will give you the option to have your money direct deposited in rather than go in a check form. You will need to fill out a W-9. Then once we have received all your information and verify that you are the owner of the property, the tenant will provide you with an inspection packet that will need to be filled out. The top page is yellow. It's where you fill out all the information regarding the unit, regarding the utilities, regarding how to contact you, and that's where the RTA is also filled out to let us know when the unit is going to be available for inspection. You will be required to fill out everything that is in yellow, and the tenant will fill out everything that is in orange. And this is a request for inspection. This is the RTA. When I was talking about who pays what rent, that is right here. So what you will do is you will indicate in these boxes here whether the utility is natural gas or electric, and then you will let us know either a T if the tenant's responsible for it, or an O if you're responsible for it. And when I'm saying responsible for it, I mean who is paying for which utility. If it's all paid by the tenant, then everything would be T's. And this is the back page of the RTA. In order to determine whether the rent you're charging is reasonable, if you're in an apartment complex, you can fill out this and let us know the apartment numbers, the date in which the lease was started, and how much rent is being charged. You can also provide the comparables for your rent reasonable through either HAR or any MLS listing that shows that they are rent reasonable. You have to certify that you do not have you are not a direct relation to the family member, which is what's filled out here, that you do not have any interest and that the participant does not have any interest in the unit. And you have to also certify that if the home was built before 1978, that there is no lead paint. So once we receive that packet back, We will inspect the unit. We'll contact you, figure out a good time to inspect it with you. You will then, once it is inspected and once it passes, we need a lease that is signed between you and the tenant. And once we receive that lease, we will send you the HAP contract that needs to be read through and then signed and returned back to us. You want to make sure that on the HAP contract, when you receive it, before you sign it, please make sure that the utilities that you specified match what was on the RTA, and that who is paying for what also matches what was on the RTA. If there is a discrepancy, if there is anything wrong with this, you need to let us know before you sign and return the document right here. And when you receive this HAP contract, it'll show the days of the lease right here. These should match your lease dates. It should tell you how much rent's being charged, and it will tell you what our initial portion of the housing authority is. Just know this is subject to change depending upon the tenant's income throughout the course of the lease. So as far as the process goes, when the tenant comes to you, you will know how much rent or what the maximum amount of rent that the family is able to pay, because they will have a rent estimator sheet, and you can ask for that or you can make a copy of that. Also, they will have a voucher with them that indicates that they are receiving housing assistance. So what you would want to do is review the voucher. This is the voucher right here, and it will show you how long the voucher is good for and the bedroom size that the family has qualified for. The rent estimator sheet will tell you if your unit is an apartment, the rent that the family can afford cannot exceed $852 in this case. If the unit that they are coming to you wanting to rent is a house, we're saying the rent for the unit cannot be more than this. Now, this is extremely low for a house, but this is just an example that we're giving you just to show. Just know that you want to review the rent estimator sheet, and if the rent that you're charging is going to be greater than the amounts here that we have specified, then you're just going to need to go ahead and deny the family and tell them they're not going to be able to participate, or you can talk to the housing authority and we can try to see if we can negotiate a different rent. So these are the maximum rents that the family can afford. As I said earlier, this is the bedroom size that the family qualifies for. The family can at times go less than that amount, and they can go greater than that amount, as long as these numbers still apply. As long as the rent for the units do not exceed these, they could actually exceed the voucher size there that's listed. So once you receive the yellow packet, we ask that you go through your normal process that you would use to screen your applicants. A family's eligibility for the program does not always guarantee that the family would be a good tenant. So please run your tenant history checks, run your criminal history checks, run anything you would do for any other client that walks through the door. If the family is eligible, if they have paid your fees, and you would like for them to be a participant and you would like for them to rent your property, then you fill out the yellow inspection packet. When we receive the yellow inspection packet back, you are telling the housing authority, I have ran the necessary checks and I want them to be able to occupy my unit. And this yellow inspection packet, completely filled out by you and the tenant, needs to be returned to the housing office. Once we receive that inspection packet, you will be contacted by us if we need to verify anything regarding your ownership. We will compare the rent that you're asking to our own payment standard and make sure that it's qualified, and that the family will be able to afford it. And we will also compare the rent that you're asking to other rents in the area to make sure that it is comparable. If it is not, then we might need to do a little bit of negotiating before we go any further in the inspection process. Once the inspection packet is approved, we will contact you to schedule an inspection. It can be you, it can be a manager, it can be an authorized representative. Someone needs to be present with us when we do the inspection. If the unit fails, we will give you a letter or we will send you something through your email to let you know what repairs are needed to be made. After reviewing that repair list, you have the choice on whether you want to complete those repairs and put the unit on the program, or if you refuse to complete them, then the tenant will be released and they will be allowed to look for another unit. If the unit does not pass, we do give you time to make those repairs and come back out and inspect the unit. If on the second inspection, the unit has still not passed, that inspection packet will be denied. Some things that commonly fail. The bathroom either doesn't have a working vent fan or the fan or the window that's in there does not open. Doors might have inoperable locks or they have locks that require a key to open from the inside. You cannot have a double keyed lock. If there's any missing covers or outlets on your switches or your outlets, those are going to have to be replaced. Any exposed, cracked, fraying wiring or any wiring that's not properly secured would be a failed item. If the electrical box are missing knockouts, plates, or if there's any open spaces in the boxes without breakers, that will also fail. If any of the sleeping rooms lack a smoke detector, that will fail. If it's in an apartment and we cannot see the apartment number or we cannot see the house's house number, that will fail. If the wooden fencing in the house in the back is broken and animals and other things come back and forth. If the stove burners do not work or they have missing knobs, that will fail. If the front and back yards are not mowed or there's trash and debris in the yard. If the windows have no locks or they fail to stay open. Those are just some of the common items. In your packet, you will have a brochure called A Good Place to Live, and that will go room by room with what is required in order for the unit to pass. Once it has passed, we ask that you sign a lease between you and your tenant, and as soon as you return the lease, then we will start the HAP contract. The HAP contract is a legally binding agreement between you as the owner and the housing authority, and it controls the payments that are going to be made to you on behalf of the owner. The second video that I'm going to ask you to listen to will go into detail more about the HAP contract. It is very important that you read all of the pages of that HAP contract and understand what you are signing and what are your obligations. That HAP contract here again needs to be signed by the housing authority and it needs to be signed by the owner, and it signifies final approval for a selected family to occupy the unit. You will be notified thereafter by lease addendums anytime that there is going to be a change in the HAP or in the tenant's portion. So remember, the amount that each of us are qualified or each of us are responsible to pay can vary within the term of the lease. When do you receive your rental payments? Well, let's see. The unit, of course, must first pass inspection. The housing assistance payment contract must be signed. We must have a lease. That's not listed here, but we've already talked about that. We must have a lease. Your first payment will usually be processed at the next check run once we receive the housing assistance payment contract back. We do 2 check runs a month on either the 1st or the 15th. And so normally, if you're doing direct deposit, the direct deposit should be in your bank on the 2nd business day of the month. Otherwise, the payments will be sent via first class mail at the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month. So just to kind of let you know how all of us are kind of interconnected, the responsibilities of each of us. The participant is connected to the housing authority because we have issued them a voucher that says they are eligible for the program and that we will assist them with their rent. After the dwelling passes inspection, the owner is connected to the housing authority through the HAP contract so that we can make payments on behalf of the participant. And of course, the owner is then connected to the tenant or participant by the rental agreement or by the lease. So you are connected to the housing authority through your HAP contract, and you have a agreement with the participant or with the tenant based upon your lease. Therefore, as you can see, the housing authority is not a party to your lease. You are responsible for all the obligations within the lease. The owner must abide by the HAP contract and ensure that the tenant complies with your lease. Part of the HAP contract has a tenancy addendum that must be attached to your lease, and the contract says that you are going to maintain your unit according to HQS standards, which is housing quality standards. There must be a lease that exists between you and the tenant. The rent that you're charging is reasonable. The rent on the HAP contract is all that you are collecting from the tenant as far as rent is concerned. You're letting us know every time you receive a payment that the family is still residing in that unit, that the family does not have any interest in that unit, which means you are not related to them or they're getting a kickback because of it, and you must not discriminate. The tenant also has separate obligations. There's a long list of them, but here's a few. Some of the few is that the tenant must abide by the terms in your lease. They must provide written notice to both the housing authority and the owner before moving out. Only the tenant and the authorized family members that you see on the HAP contract are required or must reside in that unit. They must provide notice to the housing authority before adding or removing any additional family members. They must not engage in drug-related or violent criminal activity. They cannot sublease the unit, and they cannot damage your unit. And the housing authority monitors compliance through the voucher and through the HAP contract. So the contract with the RHA, if the family fails to pay their portion of rent, you need to let the housing authority know. You need to issue a lease violation and then submit that to the housing authority. If you discover that the family has damaged your unit, you need to issue a lease violation to the family, and you must send that same violation to the housing authority. If the tenant has unauthorized occupants, the same thing applies. Issue a lease violation, let the housing authority know. If you have issued the tenant any other lease violations for any other reasons, or you've issued them an eviction notice, please let the tenant know and then let the housing authority know as well. Please read your HAP contract. Here again, the tenancy addendum, which is part C of the HAP contract, must be added to your lease, and it does supersede your lease. Your signature on the HAP contract states that you have done this. And if at any time during the HAP contract, if the unit fails an HQS inspection, repairs must be made within 30 days. If those repairs are not made, the housing authority will abate your payment, and the amount for which it is abated cannot be recovered from the tenant.